How's it going, everyone? Thanks for checking into my video. I've been really on the fence about whether or not I'm actually going to make this video because a few different reasons. Number one being I just haven't really had the time to like sit down and plan it out. I actually didn't plan it out. I'm just kind of turning on the camera and saying whatever comes out of my mouth is what's going to be in this video. So, but the second reason is I'm just kind of insecure about like how much I can really add to this conversation. In my mind, with something like this, something that's very current, a lot of people are talking about, if there's not something like seriously substantive that I can add, I'm just not going to say anything. But my wife was recently talking to me about this, and she was like, no, you have a perspective. You have things to say about this. You talk to me about it all the time. Turn on your camera and just make a video. And if anybody watches it and they're helped by it, then great. So I think she's right, and I do have some things to say, and I have a little bit of a different perspective to share, and I hope you enjoy. So this video is just going to be like, I'm going to tell you the story of how this all went down, how I came to this decision, and what sort of things were going through my mind, what factors played into it. A big one that I'm going to talk, I think, a little bit about is the fact that I have a wife and 3 small children. And that's important because the main talking point with like opponents of this view, of this Save the Main Lines view, is, well, if you just had kids, you wouldn't be talking like this. Or you'll understand when you have kids why you can't go to like a liberal church. And Redeem Zoomer himself has actually said that my wife and I serve as like prime examples of why that's just not a good argument. It's an understandable argument, but it's not particularly a good one. And I think that I could talk about that more in other videos. This video is not going to be like a researched, primary source supported, like well thought out articulation of the view. It's not going to be any of that. I can do that later. I think I'm capable of doing that. Other people have done that, a really good job of doing that. Today, I'm just getting on here. I'm talking about my experience, what was going through my mind. I already gave you that whole spiel. So anyway, this really started a few years ago when I first started to really consider Presbyterianism. And it wasn't infant baptism that got me really considering Presbyterianism in different other Christian traditions as well. Like, I was really looking into Lutheranism at the time. I have also considered Roman Catholicism. The reason why that's important, the reason why it's important or notable that it wasn't necessarily infant baptism that led me in that direction, is because I think that has like big implications for why I came to like mainline Protestantism as like what I believe is the true church. Most of the time, I think people who are like new Presbyterians or definitely like mostly new Presbyterians, is they read the Bible, they hear like R.C. Sproul, they hear these people, and they start to realize like there's something to infant baptism. And I fully agree with them. I love infant baptism. After I kind of like started looking into Presbyterianism, I, of course, by consequence, started looking into infant baptism. I found the arguments to be convincing, and I assented to it intellectually, and then I got my kids baptized. But that wasn't the reason I did it. The reason I moved to Presbyterianism to begin with was for ecclesiastical reasons. I believe that the church should be institutional. It should have some sort of central authority. It should have accountability. It should have discipline that actually works. We're going to get to that in a second or in a few minutes. I'm going to use a phrase that I've come up with I think is a helpful way to think about this. It should have mechanisms for correction. Just keep that in your mind. I'm going to get to that later. At this moment, I'm not in a church that's connected with any church in a meaningful way. It is just a non-denominational kind of Baptist church that we loved, by the way. And I was like, when I read the Bible, when I read church history, this is not what I see. So that's why I went to the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. The OPC was great as far as like the people. I loved the people there. Our congregation was awesome. I have people that I think will always be my friends there. I hope that they're always my friends. They've texted me, they've called me. They're interested in what we're doing and why we're doing it. These people have been great. My pastor was awesome. He gave us so much of his time as we were discerning this and considering it. And I think I've thought about it a couple times. I think we probably spent like a good 10 hours just talking to him about these things. And he gave us a lot of really challenging objections and things to chew on. And ultimately we made the decision we did. But anyway, that's kind of a tangent. We went to the OPC because why? Because I'm a conservative, and the OPC has conservative theology, and I just thought like this is the best church near me. So we went OPC, not really considering too much about the Reconquista. Now, at the same time, I am aware of Redeem Zoomer. I watched Redeem Zoomer's videos like early on as he was blowing up. I think when I subscribed to him first, he had like maybe 60 or 70,000 subscribers. So it was like right as he was getting popular. And he was saying some things like some crazy things I never heard before, like we should retake the main lines and not like leave them. And my initial reaction to that was, cool, you know, that's actually pretty cool perspective there, and I appreciate that, and I hope that works out. And then I just went to the OPC because I wasn't there yet. I wasn't at that point where I was like, I need to do this. I need to act on this conviction. My initial opinion of this view was, that's cool, you know? I think that's something really to consider for later on when I'm considering seminary and everything, and that's actually an important point. I am considering seminary. Not considering it, but like fully planning on going like next year. So that's important. But yeah, I went to the OPC, and as I was in the OPC, these things that Redeem Zoomer was saying, and also like different objections that Roman Catholics make, like the institutionality of the church, the centrality of the church, the authority of the church. These were things that like I didn't think they were convincing enough arguments for Roman Catholicism, but the Roman Catholics have a point about that. The church should have authority. Jesus gives the church immense authority. You have the authority to forgive sins. You have the authority to bind and loose. I mean, he chose 12 disciples, and those 12 disciples seem to like do the whole church thing. When you read the Bible, it does not look like non-denominationalism. It does not look like sort of free-for-all sort of ecclesiology. It looks like the church should be central. The church should be authoritative. And Roman Catholics use that argument as like a dunk on Protestantism, because a lot of Protestants, people who call themselves Protestants, have that sort of ecclesiology. And I was like, okay, well, you know, I have the OPC, which is like my church authority, right? But when you really think about it, and this is like the big thing, right? And I'm going to talk about J. Gresham Machen a little bit. The OPC does not have that authority. I don't mean like authority in the sense that like we're always deciding to submit to the authority in the church. I mean, like, does the church have the authority to say, you are outside of the church, you are not being faithful, we're excommunicating you, do not come to the Lord's table, and if you leave us, you're either a schismatic or you're just an apostate. Does the church actually have the authority to do that? The OPC, or really any church that has separated from the PCUSA or from any mainline church, gave up that authority. They gave up that authority just by virtue of making that decision to do that. Particularly, I want to point out J. Gresham Machen's example, because J. Gresham Machen left the PCUSA because he was brought up on charges basically for insubordination, because him and some of his buddies started a parallel committee that was not under the authority of the presbytery, and he did that, which was against the rules. And the presbytery, who, you know, they weren't like big fans of J. Gresham Machen as it was, they said, that's not allowed. You can't do that. You have to completely dissolve this, or basically you're going to be deposed. You're going to be excommunicated. That's what they told him. They told him you're going to be excommunicated. They didn't, by the way, but they told him they would. And with that being said to him, J. Gresham Machen said, no, I'm not going to dissolve that. I'm going to take the excommunication. You know, you're gonna kick me out, and I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. So, I mean, already it sounds like J. Gresham Machen's plan was to start his own thing anyway, just like he had done a few years before with Westminster Seminary and everything. And so he didn't care whether they excommunicated him. That is really the issue for me. Once I realized that, now remember, let's go back to the beginning of where I was. When I came to the OPC, I thought I was going to a church that was institutional, that was connectional, and had, here's that phrase, mechanisms for correction. How can your church have mechanisms for correction when the church authority, the central authority, which is the Presbytery of New Brunswick, says if you don't dissolve this committee because it's not under the authority of the presbytery, which is a completely biblical and lawful thing to say on the presbytery's part. Whatever their motive was, I'm sure their motive was not good because they were kind of bullying him. I don't think that really matters. I don't think it has anything to do with it. Yeah, the church, people can be jerks. But it's a lawful demand. Dissolve this committee. And under penalty of excommunication, under penalty of being deposed, being removed from your pulpit. J. Gresham Machen's response is, well, I don't care. Why? Because J. Gresham Machen's view of church authority was not high. And mine is. To me, the Presbytery of New Brunswick had authority to do that, to tell him that, to remove him from his pulpit, to take away his job. They had that authority. J. Gresham Machen basically said that if the presbytery says you are not fit to be a minister, you are being insubordinate, you're not submitting to our authority, if you think that they're wrong about that, you can just go start your own denomination. That's what he said. That's what he said. That's not what he said with words, but that's what he said with his actions. And if you look, like, it's not just the J. Gresham Machen situation, right? It's every offshoot Presbyterian or otherwise Methodist, Anglican, whatever, Lutheran, whatever the denomination happens to be. Like, if you say, no, I'm not going to listen to you, you don't matter, like, you're removing this aspect of the church. It's very important, like, I think essential to the identity of Presbyterianism, especially this aspect of this corrective process. Like, the church has the ability to correct itself. You're removing that ability. Let me give you another example, like a hypothetical. If the OPC went like south, if the OPC started to go like really liberal, there is nothing in the OPC, there's nothing inherent to the OPC that says you have to stay here and see this through. You have to wait until this gets corrected. These bad things that are going on, let's say they're having like they're blessing same-sex marriages, or they're teaching this heresy, or they're denying like the deity of Christ or something. If you say, well, when they do that, we can just leave, that's not a correctional, that's not a corrective process. That's denying the corrective mechanism that Presbyterianism has. That was a serious problem for me. I remember going to a Sunday school where they sort of did this biographical sketch of J. Gresham Machen, and they really kind of lionize him, and they make him out to be this hero. This is like the first time I really started like looking into this and considering this. They make him out to be this hero. They basically say, by they I mean like OPC people, PCA, ARP, whatever NAPARC Presbyterian body it is. They lionize him. They make him out to be a hero. They say he was hero. He was a hero. He was brave to do this thing, to leave his church behind. I'm sure it was difficult. I'm sure it was very emotional. I'm sure he felt like he was doing what he needed to do. I don't want to damage his character insofar as he was a great theologian, a great teacher, and probably a really good man. But this idea that being kicked out of your church because you decided to go against what your presbytery was asking you to do, something that was very doable, and really, I mean, how could it even go against your conscience? You started something, they're saying, please don't start that thing. Wait and like go through the correct lawful means of doing it. We have these corrective measures that you can see through. You're going against those. You're going outside of those corrective means to do your own thing. That's not allowed. Totally understandable. Jay Gresham Machen didn't want to. He wanted to start his own thing. How is that heroic? No one has been able to answer me this. I've spoken to multiple OPC pastors, ministers, other NAPARC people, and no one has given me a straight answer on this. It's because it's not. It's not heroic. I think it's an unfortunate thing that happened to him. I think what is heroic, like what I would find heroic is, okay, you're threatening to take my job away. You're threatening to possibly excommunicate me. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to fight. I'm not going anywhere. I am not going anywhere. I'm going to be a thorn in your side. I'm going to be so annoying to you. That's heroic. Like, these people obviously did not want Jay Gresham Machen there. They didn't like his theology. They didn't respect his views. That's when you dig your heels in and you stay. But he didn't do that, did he? And so all this to kind of say, like, the biggest thing, the smoking gun for me was sort of just basically removing yourself from the corrective process that is inherent in Presbyterianism. Therefore, making the church of no authority whatsoever. And that's the big thing. Like, the church does have authority. And the thing with authority, guys, is that means you have to submit to it even if you don't like it, if you don't agree with it. There are some times where we have to go against authority. And that's when, for example, they say, hey, you have to deny the deity of Christ from the pulpit. That's the day I say no, and whatever you're going to do to me, whatever you want to do is fine, but I'm not going to do that. Or you have to bless this same-sex marriage. I'm not doing that. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to excommunicate me, you're going to depose me, defrock me. By all means, do it. But I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not doing that. That's going against authority. If the presbytery or whatever your church authority is saying this is allowed, but we're not going to make you do it, that's not like persecution. That's not them like flexing their authority or pushing their authority or abusing their authority on you. That's not them saying like you have to do this or you have to leave. Like, and that's not an excuse for you to leave. Like, if your church allows something that you don't like, that doesn't mean you leave. That means you just don't do that thing. You don't participate in that thing. And there's nothing about you being in the same institution as sin or heresy that says that you are participating in it. You're just in the same institution as a non-participant in that error. And in fact, you're doing the right thing by staying in and seeing it all the way through. The other thing, and I kind of want to end with this because this video is getting a little bit long, and I do want to talk more about these things. There's so much more that could be said, but I'm like I said before, this is just like if I was talking to you, like if we were sitting on my front porch talking about this is the way I would explain it to you, just off the cuff. The other main thing is this idea of jurisdiction, and I did have thoughts about this whole thing, like the authority they have, jurisdiction. I didn't have a word for it like that until I saw just a few weeks ago, Young Anglican put out this great video, and I think he said what a lot of people are thinking. But I really think that you should go check out that video because it really explains like a lot of the big issues I had with this libertarian idea of ecclesiology. In the early church, there was this idea of jurisdiction. Like, we don't set up a parallel church in the same sort of jurisdiction. And this is kind of a highly detailed thing, and I recommend that you go watch Young Anglican's video because I'm not going to go into the same level of detail. Just ask yourself, when Paul was correcting the Corinthians or he was correcting the Galatians, did he ever say, like, leave the church that you're in, leave the institutional body you're in, and set up a church in that same place? No, he didn't say that. He corrected the church that was there. And we see this all throughout church history, that like a church institution, like diocese or presbytery or whatever you want to call it, this sort of regional church, this was like, once it was started, and you're not going to like have multiple independent parallel bodies. This is like completely absent in anything in church history early on and anything in the Bible. That's a big one for me. Like, the fact that there might be a PCA church in the same sort of like county as an OPC church or an EPC church, or non-denominationalism is the worst with this, because they'll be like non-denominational. They'll be like 3 in one town. And it's like, that's just not biblical. That's like actually really sad and terrible. Like, these people talk about, I shouldn't say these people, like people who are more libertarian in their ecclesiology, they talk about the Reconquista like it's sheep stealing. I've heard that a few times. Sheep stealing. What's sheep stealing is when you go plant a church in the same place and in the same town as another. It's completely independent from it. And I don't know, the people there like your food better, or they like your preaching better, or they like your kids program better, and they go like, that's literally sheep stealing. That would be that would be completely condemned in the early church. And that's something that I think a lot of people should think about. A few words on the church that we ended up going to, and how it's all going so far. It's going really well. And part of the reason we know that this was the right thing to do, and God is really in this and with us in this, is that he's really blessed us. We've been received with open arms by our church. By the way, our church is a little bit more liberal. I would say it's more moderate, but not conservative. And these people know that we try to be very orthodox in our beliefs. We're very traditionalist. They're not like that, but they're just happy to have a young family who is excited, loves the Lord, and is ready to serve, because they're ready for it, and they want to help us like serve and get into positions of leadership, and they want to help me go to seminary and get on an elder track. Like, they're ready for us, and they're blessing us, and they respect us. That is just a beautiful thing. These people are awesome. We've made amazing friends with everybody. We love our pastor, which happens to be a female, by the way, and we love her, and she's fantastic. It's been great. And about our kids, listen, guys, my kids do not hear really solid, like, Westminster Catechism teaching things from the adults in this church. And that's fine, because I catechize them. I do Bible study with them. I teach them things. They do catechism every night. They do catechism song. They memorize the Westminster Catechism. We explain it to them. I am not at all scared of liberalism creeping into their brain in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I really do believe that them being exposed to it and me correcting it along the way will help them see that, like, not only are these people are very friendly and kind, and they're actually very Christ-like in a lot of ways, and there's good things about them. There's good things they have to say. If I raise them in an environment that kind of shelters them from that, they're going to be surprised when they grow up and find that these people are like really actually nice. This is like the most common objection to this whole thing, like I said before, and I just don't think it really has any credence to it whatsoever. Now, obviously, don't go to a like really bad heretical liberal PCUSA church with your kids. That's not what I'm saying. You don't have to go to like a super traditional conservative, like patriarchal CREC church for your kids, for them to have good theology growing up. They need a father who's involved, a mother who's willing to teach them. They need the Holy Spirit guiding them. If you're someone who's thinking about doing this, you have kids, just look around. There's probably a congregation that, while they might struggle with a little bit of liberalism, they won't be like too crazy. Like, they won't like indoctrinate your kids with like crazy communist stuff. And my church certainly doesn't do that. Our church is like pretty decent, orthodox things coming from the pulpit. Every once in a while you hear something like a little bit off to me, something maybe I wouldn't agree with, but nothing bad at all. It's actually like I think a really good church. And who knows, like maybe next to you there's a really good church with like Westminsterian theologian as a pastor, and they have like awesome men's groups or something like that. I don't know, like I'm just trying to describe like what a good church might be to you. Maybe their coffee's really good. I don't know. There's like probably 30 PCUSA churches in driving distance from you. Probably like at least 15 of them. And if there's not a PCUSA church, there's probably a Methodist church. There's probably an Episcopal church. There's probably an ELCA church. Go on Google and just find one that's decent. Go to the map, ever famous map that I'll link in the description, where you can find one, and go to it. I really recommend doing this. I believe that I believe every Christian is obligated to go to a mainline Protestant church. I believe that that's the most correct form of Christianity. And if we flood these churches with faithful, Bible-believing, Christ-loving, Christ-exalting people, it'll fix not just the church, but America. And so thank you for listening to me rant and ramble aimlessly about this, why I'm doing this, why I've done this, and why I think you should do it. I hope you enjoyed. Have yourself a very nice day.